together sometimes. So we do the best we can. So we have a lot to catch up on. And so without further ado, I'm going to go straight to Miss Connie and say, Connie, what have you been up to in the past few months?
Well, this summer has been really busy. Thanks, Judy. And also, it's great to be the three of us again, the Three Musketeers at the podcast. And I had a busy summer. Very busy summer with, I had actually 2 shows, one in Wolfboro and then another one in the Kennedy Gallery in Portsmouth. And then David and I did some design, a design workshop. We did several other workshops. I've been working on the In Focus book, and discovered this guy, Alexander Cousins, who was in 1750 and 1760s. He was sort of the father or inspiration for Constable, and he did this thing that was a blot. It was like, anyway, for me it was fascinating because being a psychologist, 100 years later was Rorschach. And with the ink blots that people have heard about, and that was when I was in graduate school. I loved these ink blots because I thought it was so sophisticated and such a fine psychological tool to assess personality. Yeah. So if you can imagine, anyway, this was one fun find, and there were several others.
Yeah. So you've been doing a lot of reading this summer.
Exactly.
Thinking up a storm and reading. I think that's a wonderful thing. Summer should be for reading. I love to read in the summer. So, well, what about you, Dave? What have you been up to?
Well, we just got back from the 3 of us did a workshop together. Yeah. Our first workshop together. I thought it was great. We went to our favorite painting spot in East Gloucester, Rocky Neck. And Judith does a regular historical walk around Rocky Neck, and so she did that at the end of the day. And Connie and I taught a sight and insight, what we call impromptu class, and the title of the class was Location, 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 which I thought, just to reiterate a little bit, sometimes when you arrive on a site, you're taken in by so much beauty from nature, that it's hard to discern how I'm going to compose it. And Connie, you have a wonderful way of using your thoughts and feelings and organizing your thoughts and feelings that tie into that compositional necessary. I mean, I know you talked about the line and design, but you're also talking about ways to memorize because it sort of applies to how the brain works.
Right. I mean, there is some it's not exactly new evidence, but connections are really everything about remembering something. And so you're not really remembering an object out there. Let's say it's an apple or whatever. It's actually all the connections in that apple and also in relationship to the context. And it so applies to painting that we want to really, it's sort of like the figure ground reversal thing in a way, but this is looking at associations or relationships between objects so that you're not just focusing on these separate objects.
Right, and I think that's what we tried to teach today, because we had an incoming tide. When we got there, we saw a beautiful low tide effect, and some people wanted to paint that. And I think you pointed out by connecting up, and it could connect up with the color, it could connect up with the memory of maybe just the texture of the quality, but that's, I think you said, harder to memorize.
Yeah, that's textures. What they say, that textures are very hard to remember and keep repeating and all that kind of stuff. But I actually was talking about how smells and tastes, those are very much memorable.
Yeah, the smell of low tide.
Isn't it amazing?
It is, yes.
And so that I actually talked about that when I took them down on location. Is I said, it's about remembering the light, the texture of the air or the vibration, which is really atmospheric, and then this taste. And so it's interesting because everybody could sort of visualize.
So what you're saying, through the sense of taste or smell,
you actually
the
get
whole
a sense of the scene.
you get more of a recall.
Yeah, exactly. And more of a total recall of what did that scene look like, even color-wise. Mm-hmm. So we're talking, emphasizing color and design, and we want people to get more attuned to that, that color sensation and what are the differences, in the color harmonies. And I think you get that even with adding this extra sense,
right,
which is taste.
Because I think it's true. I think we paint from memory almost all the time.
I think so too.
Even when something's in front of you?
Yes,
yeah.
Especially out of doors. I mean, a still life in a portrait might be different. You're in a controlled environment of light. When you're out of doors, it's moving. And that's part of the charm, is the changing light. But you have to either accumulate so much knowledge about direction and things like that. And, I've done it for many years, so I have that sort of background. But to teach it afresh to somebody, I think you're painting from memory. And I think your first thought about what you wanted to paint, yes, is the structural composition. But then as you develop the painting, as time goes along, and today it was, here we are at the end of September, really the end of summer, and the light has drastically changed a lot since when, all the days we were out painting the summer.
Right.
But,
you really struck on something, this thing about the changing light, and we know that in plein air painting, it's constantly changing. The wind whips up, all these different things. But I was just struck by, we were talking about the taste of something. And I think this is a what do you want to say? This supports being in plein air versus doing photography, is that you get these, all your senses are engaged when we're out on site, versus you're in a studio or wherever you're painting from this photograph. You are on recall. But if you haven't had that sense of all those senses, I really think now I'm realizing how important those all the senses that are taking in the atmosphere, the scene are important.
Well, I think you did a great job because you're able to mix the psychology with the painting and give them first-hand impression of, and most people, we were lucky, most people had never been to that location.
That's true.
I think there was only maybe one or two
right.
in the class that had been there before, so it was a fresh location to them. And then we had Judy comes in at the end of the class for the last hour, and we're in an area where there's so much history. Judy Curtis wrote a great book on the history of Rocky Neck, 1850 to 1950 is the name of the book. It's worth getting. So she was able to give her insightfulness and her sight by taking everybody in the class on a walking tour.
The only problem with the art trail is that we go to the various spots. It's kind of interesting to go to the very place where some of these great artists painted, but then you miss out on people like Jane Peterson, Cecilia Bow, who painted in that area, but because they don't have a specific
so they don't have
spot
a house.
on, they don't, just because their studio wasn't specifically on Rocky Neck. You kind of have to gloss over that and concentrate on the ones who did have, now we're arriving at the studio of Hugh Henry Breckenridge. Next door was the Bryan studio. So it covers a lot of information. To be honest, you can only cover so much before people's eyes glaze
So does this
over.
mean you're going to write another book about the history of Gloucester?
Woo, that'd be so good.
Well, it's always interesting to write about this area.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating how many people, how many artists from the best of American artists probably painted on Cape Ann at some point. I just find it amazing.
Yeah.
And it always strikes me as interesting that Dave's dad was born in 1910, And so in 19, when he was born, you've got people like Frank Duveneck who's still coming up here in the summer and putting work in the gallery on the moors. I just think it's amazing that you have that kind of key. I knew somebody who was alive when this was going on.
I know, that's
so
true.
It's you can.
In the home of John Singer Sargent's father?
Where's that? Oh,
Gloucester?
down on Gloucester, yes.
Yeah.
And they had, I don't know if the exhibition's still ongoing, they had a great exhibition just recently.
Yeah, they live downtown, Sergeant Murray Gilman
Yes,
House.
I
That
didn't
would be
know that.
Sargent's. John Singer Sargent's
Yeah,
father
they
was
have
born in
sergeants.
Gloucester, married a woman from Philadelphia, and they became.
You know all of that is so important about this area, and I feel it's like that rich history is informing us, don't you think?
Yes, yeah.
I
Like
mean,
where
I was
we
just
were,
thinking if I was located in, even Fredericksburg, I think that's an interesting town, but it doesn't have the history and the richness, and somehow, I mean, we're carrying on a legacy, and I love that. I really do, as opposed to, living any other place.
Well, in the rich history that we're talking about, the location today was a beach that Winslow Homer had painted on several times.
Amazing.
And it was very nice to have the students feel that. And we could see where Winslow Homer lived,
Exactly.
just off the coast on an island for his summers that he came to Gloucester. There is a great show of Winslow Homer's in Gloucester now.
Yeah.
You mean the one at the Charles Gallery? Right?
No,
it's
the one
the
at the
Cape Ann
Cape Ann
Museum.
Historic Museum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it's
Did you go?
not yet. Hope you can come down, you and Peter, and we'll all go.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because it's kind of interesting seeing what Homer did, and somebody like Winslow Homer, and when I originally wrote about him for the first Rocky Neck book, I was sort of concentrating on the two trips he made, 1873 and 1880. But then, as I did a talk about him for the Charles Gallery in Gloucester to celebrate, I think it's like his 150th anniversary of when he first came, which was actually, I think, 1869.
Wow.
When he was in Magnolia, Manchester, he was painting.
Right.
And when I was looking at that, I suddenly realised, which I obviously didn't take in when I was writing the original book, because I was writing, when you start writing about a lot of different people, you kind of got to get a bit here and a bit there and a bit there. Whereas when you're concentrating on one person, you can do deeper research. So I suddenly found out that when Winslow Homer first came here in 1873, and he was well known as an illustrator, he was already a national academician. He had some beautiful, huge oil paintings. He got into the academy with a painting, was it Prisoner at the Front or something like that?
So he
and
was
it also
already
went to the
very
Paris,
talented.
Yeah,
artist.
he went to the Paris Exposition. I mean, he was such a good painter. And yet, when he came here in 1873, the newspapers put in, the illustrator Winslow Homer is here, and he's doing sketches, and we'll see them in Scribner's and Harper's Weekly. They still classed him as an illustrator. Yeah, which I just think is strange.
So he struggled with that probably his
that's
whole
why
career.
that's why he was trying to make the break from doing illustration.
And it's amazing that he did in Gloucester. I said to Judy that maybe he was the first one to understand what a mudhead was.
Well, that's
And it's those silhouettes of the young boys' heads against the light, like we saw
That's
today.
what he did. He
right?
did do a lot of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that
That's what they
complained about.
And Annie Marx's photograph of us was a mudhead.
Yes, it was.
Wasn't it?
We're silhouettes against, and
We're
where he would have
silhouetted.
been. And the other thing you pointed out today, which was really good, was where he stayed on that island. Gave him a very unique perspective of the in and outgoing boats.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
You could be at
You
shore
know,
level, in a lot of places around Gloucester and Cape Ann, but
Right.
to be actually on the island, surrounded by water, it must do something to your colour sense, the effect
That's
of
what
the
I'm
light.
thinking too.
And these huge schooners are cruising past en masse.
Wow.
It was classed as the Cove of 1,000 Masts, according to Charles Hassan, because there were so many schooners. It had the biggest
I
fishing
didn't know
fleets
that.
in the east. It must have been a terrific sight.
and beautiful to
Yeah.
reproduce.
Yeah.
You know.
So you see,
That is
Yeah,
amazing.
so home is well worth checking out at the Cape Ann Museum and seeing some
I
of the
would love to
pieces
see
you
that.
did.
Yeah.
It's an interesting show. So well, we did have some exciting adventures this summer. It seems to have gone
Well,
so
I
quickly.
thought today was the most exciting.
Yeah, it was.
I know. It
Well, it was the
was.
first time, it's interesting, we're doing a podcast just after we taught a class, the three of us together for the first time. History, the psychology and art, and myself with just painting, but together the three of us
Yeah.
make one complete person.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
One intelligent
We
thought.
should also talk about the fact that we have an upcoming show.
Yes.
We have the home show.
Yeah.
And this is September 28th at my house, and that would be Kittery Point. And this is the third annual, soon to be a tradition.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes, the third annual Three with a Brush.
And
So
three
that's-
with a brush.
That's Connie, David, and their painting buddy Tommy Heinsohn, who many people know as a basketball star, manager, coach, announcer, but he's also an excellent painter. You wouldn't think such a big guy when you see him. I hate to say that he uses the brush delicately because that's probably insulting to one of his stature, but he really is just the way he manipulates the paint is just great. I mean, he does some beautiful things.
It's so true.
And he's an outdoor painter, and so if you would like to come to the exhibition, what do? They get in touch with you,
They
Connie, to reserve a place?
So it's email me at lorwenpaintings@gmail.com.
Okay.
And that's LORWEN.
Yes,
Paintings.
Lorwen. That's a great Welsh name. Lorwen.
Yes.
And I know that because parking is limited, that you have arrangements, and they'll find out
Right.
the details when they reserve the space.
Exactly.
Okay, well that
Exactly.
sounds great. I'm looking forward to that myself.
Me too,
Well, this
actually.
is the third year, and I think it's gotten better this year.
I think there's some really
There's about,
fascinating pieces.
between the three of us, I think there's somewhere close to 40 to
40
45 paintings.
Yeah, exactly.
Recent work.
Hanging, yeah.
Yes,
in
all
a-
recent
In a
work.
beautiful home. I think sometimes when you see paintings in a gallery, it doesn't evoke any feeling, but when you see paintings in a home,
I agree.
right away that homey quality comes through, and you see what your painting or the painting that you might be attracted to would look like in a setting of a
Right.
dining room or a living room or a foyer, whatever it would be. And so I think it's a special kind of a show for that reason, you know.
Yeah. And I have to say that Connie has a beautiful home. The feng shui is wonderful. I love
thank
it. I
you.
feel so calm when I step through the door. So I think, yes, I think knowing what they've looked like the last 2 years, I think you'll have a fabulous show, wonderful refreshments.
That's right.
And just all around scintillating conversation about art, all things art. And so I hope you can join them. Like I say, just check in with lorwenpaintings@gmail.com to reserve a space. And I think actually, can you believe it? We've almost run out of time. Unless you have anything that you want to add that's very important that we can go over
I'll
time.
just, the other thing, we've announced our show, but coming up in October,
Oh,
we'll
yes.
be doing
We have
at least three more
impromptu
classes on color.
Now,
One
how
will-
can they be impromptu if you're already planning them?
well,
Well, they're one day.
They're
one
one-day
day.
classes, and they're 4 hours long, and we design a course for each one. So the first
And,
one will
and
be
they're
about
very
hue,
specific.
Yeah.
There's, yeah.
hue
They're
and
not just
imagination.
open.
And the second one is about value, so you will actually have to execute a black and white painting from nature. And the third will be about the intensity of color. And I think that's sort of breaking color down into
Right.
the theory of color into three bases.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a great way to help people. And the idea of doing a black and white on location to check your values. They say it's so easy to paint out of doors and just get so overwhelmed by the amount of
Colour.
nature in front of you and colour. Yes, what do you put in, what do you leave out? So that sounds like a great selection of
I'm
workshops
glad you
coming
brought
up.
that up. I almost forgot.
So we'll post that information for you for the future, or you can check out the website, which is davidpcurtis.com, all lowercase, and or lawinpaintings.com. So if you want further information on these upcoming workshops, you can always check there. Or if you've got anything else, just give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, we wish you great painting weather for all you artists out there. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be back with you before too long, we hope. So thank you for listening, and bye for now.